Hello and welcome to my channel. In this one I'm gonna show you how to draw a cat using charcoal. Let's start. First I'm gonna draw the sketch and then I'm gonna switch to charcoal. I'm gonna use a couple of different forms of charcoal. But as for the paper I'm gonna use, it's gonna be the UART 800 paper. So this time I'm working on a sanded paper rather than regular paper. And I've been experimenting with this paper lately, and I've used all kinds of pencils with it. This time I wanted to try charcoal. My experience was that it didn't really make that much of a difference. It was pretty much what I expected. Blending was a little bit easier because this textured surface grabs onto the charcoal dust. And it's a little bit easier to move that material around, but it's also a little bit more difficult to erase. Other than that, it performed more or less the way charcoal normally performs, so in my experience charcoal doesn't really make a huge difference. Paper doesn't really make a huge difference when it comes to charcoal. Some people would probably disagree and criticize me for saying that, but I don't really think that paper is a really big deal when it comes to charcoal. I started by shading or covering the background with some darker value. I first used a willow charcoal stick and I pushed that in with my finger. I wanted the background to be mostly dark, and that way some of the lighter parts of the cat will stand out in contrast against the background. So I'm doing a little bit of blending, and I'm going to be doing most of the blending on the background with my finger because that's the quickest and the easiest and probably the best way. One of the things that I found interesting on this surface was that willow charcoal looks a little bit darker, and it's a little bit easier to achieve darker values with it than on regular paper, because on regular paper it's a bit easier to move it around, whereas on this sanded surface it grabs onto that fine dust a little bit better and you get slightly darker values. Anyway, I was initially thinking about creating an area of lighter value just above the cat's back, but later I will change that and most of the background will be fairly dark. I zoomed in a little bit so now we can focus on the details. I'm going to draw the eyes now, and I'm doing that with a charcoal pencil now. So I switched to charcoal pencils and I'm using Master's Touch woodless charcoal pencils. These are pretty easy to sharpen, and that's the main reason why I like using them, and I've done many drawings with them. And especially the medium charcoal pencil is easy to use when it comes to drawing smaller details because it can be sharpened pretty well and it holds that tip for a fairly long time. So I'm drawing some of the lighter details on the ear now, and I'm pulling those with a Kohinoor pencil eraser. You can see that there is a little bit of muddying here, which indicates that it's a little bit difficult to erase on this surface, but I will do what I can. So it doesn't have to be super bright as long as I'm able to achieve a sufficient amount of contrast. At this point I realized that I wanted to make all of the background darker, and I just created some charcoal powder by sharpening one of my woodless charcoal pencils, and then I blended that with my finger. I got a fairly even dark background, which is not distracting, which is what I wanted. And then I moved on to the eyes again. I shaded them very lightly with a brush by pushing in a tiny bit of charcoal dust there. And then I drew the pupils with a medium charcoal pencil again. Now I think you can already tell that the light source is coming more from the left side, which means that the left side is going to be the light side and the right side is going to be the shadow side. So everything that is on the right side, even the lighter parts of the cat, should appear darker. So the eye on the right is darker than the eye on the left. The lighter fur on the right is going to appear darker than the lighter fur on the left. So we're going to need to stay consistent with that, but as you will see, the outline of the cat will be catching some light from that light source above. The reference photo will be included in the description, so you can check it out and see what changes I made to it, because I did make some slight changes to some of the values and the lighting, I think, because I wanted to establish more contrast with this darker background, so I made the top part of the back a little bit lighter. I made it look like that part of the cat's body is catching a bit of light from that light source. Anyway, now let me talk a little bit about drawing this fur, because I started drawing fur on the top of the head, and the fur here is really short. So my approach was to draw some of these darker patches of fur or darker stripes first, then draw a little bit of lighter details in between, and then blend that with a brush. I'm using a flat bristle brush with a crop tip. And another thing that I've noticed is that when you're blending on this surface, there is a bit more muddying and a bit more blurring, but still brushes allow you to preserve that texture. This is important because that allows you to imitate the appearance of the fur, and at the same time you don't have to draw every single hair, because that would be very tedious and time consuming. So my approach is to try to imitate the appearance of the fur by paying attention to the length of the fur and the direction of the fur. And once I do that, I just blend and I blend, and even when I blend and I soften the fur, a little bit of that texture still remains. It just becomes a little bit fluffier and a bit more realistic. Moving on to the nose now. So with the nose, again, I'm using a sharp medium charcoal pencil, and as you can see, this medium charcoal pencil is my primary drawing tool, because it allows me to draw smaller details, finer details, but at the same time I can use it to shade some of the larger areas. I tend to use the soft charcoal pencil sparingly for some of the darkest bits, here and there when I feel like I need to increase the range of value, or when I feel like I need to increase the contrast between areas which are already dark and those that need to be pitch black. So I will use that sparingly. The soft charcoal pencil is a little bit softer, obviously, easier to blend, but also a bit darker. There is a very subtle difference between the two, but there is some difference nonetheless. To draw these whiskers, I used the Kohinoor pencil eraser, and I had to rotate my drawing a little bit so that I could pull these long curved marks a little bit more comfortably. These are supposed to be long, thin, curved white lines, not necessarily completely white, but they need to stand out against the background. So I did the best I could, the best the medium allowed me to do. So I can do some erasing, I can create a little bit of contrast, but you know, there are limitations to that. When I want to create an illusion of really short fur, because the length of the fur varies in different parts of the cat's body. Sometimes it's longer, where you need longer strokes, longer pencil strokes. Sometimes it's so short that it looks like a bunch of dots. So to produce that fine texture, you can just drag the pencil a little bit, and you can create a texture like a group of small, very tiny random marks that kind of look like really short fur. Anyway, now as you can see, I'm drawing this edge between the mouth and the neck and the head and the neck, and now I'm adding some more details on the face. There are these stripes on the face as well as all of the body, and their position is kind of important if I want to keep the likeness of the cat. It doesn't have to be perfect, but I want to make it, you know, as close as possible to the original, to the reference. One of the things that I mustn't forget, and I've already mentioned that, was that even when I look at some of the lighter portions of lighter fur, like white fur on the right side of the face, it can't remain white. It needs to be darker than the stuff on the left because it's in the shadow. So I always have to push myself to add a little bit more value to everything that is on the right side so that I can retain that larger contrast, that larger relationship between the areas of lighter and darker value. Because if I fail at that, all the effort that I put in to creating the texture of the fur will be kind of wasted, because the overall shape of the cat won't look good. As you can see, now I'm moving on to the rest of the body, and now I'm going to be drawing some slightly longer fur and slightly longer stripes. But this part of the body is interesting because the cat is turning towards us. It's twisting its neck and body slightly towards us. It's a very interesting body position, and yeah, it gives us an opportunity to practice drawing the cat's anatomy a little bit, and you know, trying to understand the shape and the position of the body. But one of the things that's helping me here is also these stripes and the direction of the fur, which is kind of showing us the way that the cat's body is bending and twisting. And these folds in the fur will be following the way the body is bending. So as you can see, first I usually draw some of these larger stripes or patches of darker fur, then I add a little bit of lighter marks in between them, then I blend a little bit, and then do some more refining a little bit later. So as you can see, I decided to create a portion of lighter value at the very top of the cat's body. That is why I cleaned up that edge first with a kneaded eraser. So I like using a combination of erasers. I usually find that using just one type of eraser is not enough. The Kohinoor pencil eraser is convenient because you can hold it and draw with it like you would with a pencil. But a kneaded eraser doesn't leave any residue. It doesn't muddy the marks as much. It just lifts up the material, and that can be an advantage when working on a textured surface like this, which can create a little bit of problem when it comes to erasing. So as I always recommend in many of my other videos, whenever I'm drawing in charcoal, I always like to use different types of tools, or each and every one of the tools. So with charcoal drawing tools, I like to use charcoal pencils, charcoal sticks, willow charcoal, vine charcoal, whatever, charcoal powder. I also like to use different types of blending tools, so my finger, tortillons, brushes, whatever. And of course, when it comes to erasing, I like to use at least 2 types of erasers. And by using different types of tools for each and every purpose, that gives me more flexibility. It gives me an opportunity to use all of their advantages and maybe avoid some of their shortcomings or their disadvantages in order to make them work for me better. Anyway, as you can see, I'm making a lot of progress now on the middle part of the body and drawing this hip and the hind leg area. I'm pulling some lighter marks at the top and in between the leg and the rest of the body. And now I'm just doing a little bit of refining with with a charcoal pencil to try to create a little bit of a finer texture, and also to create a more natural transition between those patches of darker fur and lighter fur, because I don't want to make those stripes look like they're painted on or something, but I want to make them look like groups of darker fur, so a bunch of smaller, darker objects. Anyway, I'm doing the same thing on the rest of the body here on this backside area, and notice that it will be mostly in the shadow, but this area all the way to the right, I'm working on that with a pencil eraser, again pulling some lighter marks, because that's catching a little bit of light from, a little bit of reflected light from the other side. So that's still in the shadow, but it's not going to be the darkest portion of the body. And the darkest part of that shadow area is a little bit closer to the center, but still on the right side. Anyway, I'm drawing the rest of these stripes here. As you can see, these are a little bit larger, longer here, and the fur is a little bit longer as well. And I'm drawing some slightly lighter marks in between, and later, of course, I'm just going to blend with a brush. Some of the texture gets softened, some of it gets lost. It doesn't really matter. I can always go back in and refine it a little bit, but I do want it to look a little bit softer. So the cat is sitting on some sort of a bench or a table, it doesn't really matter, but it's a wooden surface, and I need to try to imitate the appearance of the wood by imitating the texture of the wood. I'm going to use that, I'm going to draw that using a combination of a charcoal pencil and a pencil eraser. Just try to draw the grain of the wood like so. The pencil does a lot of the work for me, because I can just drag it and allow it to create a random texture of its own. So this left side is pretty much done. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. I just have to finish the rest of the cat's body. Now I'm going to draw some more of these stripes on the tail. And again, just like with the rest of the body, I start with the darkest details first. I draw some of these interrupted shapes, like a bunch of darker lines that look like darker hair, and then of course I draw some slightly lighter hairs in between. There is a lot of blending in the meantime, and you can see one of the effects of the blending is that the whole thing gets a little bit darker in terms of value, and some of the contrast is lost. But one of the ways I can bring back that contrast is by using an eraser, but also by using the darker pencil to reinforce some of those darker areas. So I sometimes switch to the soft charcoal pencil to go over those really dark black areas, and that way I can increase the range of value and increase the contrast between those parts of the fur which are maybe still a little bit darker but not completely dark, and those that are supposed to be really dark or pitch black, if that makes sense. I'm just doing a little bit more erasing this time with a pencil eraser, pulling some lighter marks to draw some hairs and clumps of fur which are a little bit lighter. And once I finish that, all I have left is to do the rest of this wooded area in the lower right corner, and I'm going to do that in a similar way that I did the one on the left. I also added a little bit more shadow under the tail, because the tail and the body is going to be casting a little bit of shadow there. And now I'm finishing the rest of the background, removing these pieces of tape that the drawing was secured with, and just covering those corners with charcoal. Anyway, the drawing is done. I put my signature in the lower left corner. Let me know what you think in the comments. Give me a like and subscribe. For much more content and longer videos, you should check out my Patreon. Thanks for watching, and I'm gonna see you in the next one. Bye for now.